As we speak, Senator Bernie Sanders is taking part in the, let's see, that's the Come Together and Fight Back tour right now with DNC Chair Tom Perez. And so they're doing a number of different rallies and speeches. You might have already seen some of that. But as that's going on, the Washington Post comes out with an editorial by Aaron Blake breaking down some of the reasons that they think that Bernie Sanders' behavior has become weird lately. Some of the things they cite is that he is still not technically a Democrat, which is true and has been true for decades. Suddenly more relevant, I guess. He criticized Hillary Clinton's slogan, "I'm with her," recently. He said President Trump did not win the election, the Democrats lost the election, which some people have said in other places too. Sanders' message has, quote, deferred from Perez's in a couple key ways. Well, oh my God, they don't agree on everything. And so you take these things and the fact that he wasn't very outspoken in favor of Ossoff in Georgia, and then we have another candidate that he's supporting, which we'll get into in just a little bit. And so they think that it's weird. Cenk, I know that you are very interested in this. Do you think that he's being too weird lately?
So I think, I'm gonna go further. I think there's a concerted attack on Bernie Sanders by the establishment. And usually led by the Washington Post and now led by the Washington Post again. In fact, I didn't quite recognize it until recently. I mean, yesterday I did the story out from Slate where they had this, you want to talk about weird, they had this weird attack on Bernie's podcast. Like, well, this is out of the blue, and it turns out it's not out of the blue. The memo's out by the establishment. We're back to hating Bernie Sanders. So let's break it down. So they say he disagrees with Tom Perez on some stuff. That's a really surprise to you guys? The Washington Post, you guys are journalists, and that's a surprise? Of course he disagrees with Tom Perez on some things. Bernie Sanders says Medicare for all. Most of the establishment Democrats don't say that. They have to be pushed really, really hard to go in that direction. On TYT Politics, Michael Tracy just covered a Dianne Feinstein town hall. You go watch the video for yourself. And Dianne Feinstein is not for Medicare for all. Tom Perez is not for it, so when he's asked, he says, we think healthcare should be a right. What does that mean? Which legislation are you in favor of? I don't want to annoy my donors, so I'm not going to say Medicare for all because I want to keep taking their money. And Bernie Sanders, still a progressive, still fighting for those things. And so they don't agree. They don't agree. And so, I mean, and it goes down the list, every single thing that they stated. You're surprised that he thinks the Democrats lost the election? Of course the Democrats lost the election. They lost to the most unpopular person to ever run for office. Donald Trump was sitting at a 37% approval rating on the day of the election. He didn't win the election. Hillary Clinton lost it. That is not a surprising thing for a progressive to say. So for them to feign like, oh, how dare you, Bernie Sanders? Part of it is definitely Ossoff, and I know that they're mad about that, and I get that that's a legitimate fight. I'm on Bernie's side on that, but it's a legitimate fight. But the rest of it is, he won't bend a knee. There he goes again.
Well, but let me just throw this out here for the rest of the conversation. It's that he is being attacked by the establishment, which I think means several different things, but he's being attacked by multiple forms of it. But he's not just being attacked by the establishment, he's also being attacked by libs for being involved in this tour at all. Every time Bernie Sanders does anything with Tom Perez, people start, like, you hear the murmur a little bit, oh, is he selling out? Oh, is this Elizabeth Warren during the primary again? And I don't think that there's anything inconsistent whatsoever with him being involved in this effort and trying to organize and rally for the Democratic Party and disagreeing with it. He does want people to come together, it's a unity thing, but he wants them to come together around his positions. He wants to move them in the right direction. That's exactly what he should be doing. And yet I believe he's being attacked from both sides. Anytime he's seen as being an ally of someone like Tom Perez.
Let me ask you a question here. I guess the question is, what is the intention? Like, what is Senator Sanders' intention when you head out on this kind of tour that probably had some kind of mission statement they all agreed to before they decided to go do it? I'm thinking back to my high school days, and I played basketball, and I always had this coach who's like, what's your intention? When you go in the paint, you're just gonna stand there and wait for something to happen. When you go set a pick, like, what is your intention? And he was always yelling that from the sidelines. And I look at this behavior, and I just think, yes, you probably think they wanted to bring them back online, get everybody on the same page, but why even do the tour then if you're gonna be at odds?
And I have a theory on that. By the way, I like your coach. My theory is that Bernie's a really good guy, and I'm gonna criticize him here in a sense, that he naively believed that he hey, the establishment lost the election. You lost to Trump, and look at all this popularity. And I'm the most popular politician in the country. And I can show you the polling where progressives want. It's not just progressives want. Americans want the progressive policy positions. He naively thought that the Democratic Party could go in that direction, and hence the effort at unity. But Bernie, they're never going to agree because their whole incentive structure is based around the donors. They can't agree. It's the same mistake that Obama made in a sense, or the press asked Obama to make. Oh, have a beer summit with Mitch McConnell. You're not gonna convince Mitch McConnell over a beer. He gets paid to disagree with Obama, and the Democratic Party establishment is never going to agree with Bernie Sanders. So this whole talk of unity is a mirage. So I wouldn't have gone on the tour, not because I don't like Tom Perez, okay, not because I don't hope for unity, but I know that their financial incentives are aligned against us. So and they use unity as a slogan, a punchline to try to get progressives to just do whatever the Democratic Party wants. Now, if you really meant unity, well, why not unify behind Bernie Sanders, the most popular politician in the country? Isn't that logical? But they won't. They won't do Medicare for all. They won't do his proposals. They just want to use him as a mascot.
Now you're looking at me.
Yeah. Go.
Nothing. There's nothing I've gone. I love Bernie Sanders. I think he's great. I think that he's had his day on this stuff, and if he is going to go out with Tom Perez, he should go out with Tom Perez, not cower and not stand down from what he believes, but go do what that mission is. And if not, say no. Say, I'm not going to go out on this tour. I'm not comfortable with it. The way I think with Ossoff, I don't think he should have endorsed Ossoff, but I don't think he should have said, I'm not going to endorse Ossoff. I think he should have just sat that one out. The Heath Mello
he has,
thing.
by the way, today endorsed him for the next election.
Right, but that's an easier,
Of course,
it would have been better for Ossoff.
Yes.
Ossoff's happy to have him, and he is somebody who commands so much respect from so many voters, and he may in fact help Ossoff there. And Bernie has nothing to lose, because if Ossoff wins now, the progressives can say, hey, look, Bernie endorsed him, and look what happened. See, you can even put a Democrat over the line. But I'm sure Tom Perez said, hey, Bernie, you got to do this. And another thing you have to remember is Tom Perez worked for over a year to not get Bernie Sanders elected. He worked with Hillary Clinton for a very long time. They are, they probably see a lot alike. They worked together, I know, on civil rights before any campaign for president existed for either Clinton or Sanders. I know Sanders and Perez worked together. But that's the point here. The Democrats are trying to do something now, do this 50-state strategy. If you can't go all in, whether you believe it or not, you're better off just saying, no, I'm not going to go out there and do this with Tom Perez. And it's easier said than done, I know, but I think that that's what Sanders should have done. I also think that when you inject yourself into the national conversation, as Sanders has done now and has come back into doing, that you set yourself up for whatever criticism that may engender. And there's going to be criticism of that, which is fine. I mean, that he's not afraid of that.
Yeah, that's all good. I'm just going to ask the press to do two things, though. Okay, one, don't flip out if Bernie Sanders and other Democrats don't agree. They don't agree. Yeah. What's the big deal? And why is it Bernie Sanders' strange behavior? Why is the article's title not Tom Perez's strange behavior? Why did Tom Perez invite Bernie Sanders on a unity tour as the head of the DNC? Didn't he check with him earlier?
But it's a good idea, Cenk. It's a good idea if you're Tom Perez and you have somebody who's playing.
But why didn't you check? I mean, we just said, why didn't Bernie check?
Because no, I didn't say why didn't Bernie check. I just said Bernie shouldn't have done it if he didn't want it. It's their tour, he's joining their tour, right? If you're not going to play their songs, I'm not saying you have to. It's not a matter of walking lock. I mean, he's endorsing Heath Mello for a mayoral candidate in Nebraska, and he's endorsing him even though he's pro-life. So that's not consistent with Sanders' message, but that's okay also.
But to say that it's Perez's party, right? Almost literally, right?
I mean, he's the chairman of the DNC.
No,
that's
he
what
is.
I'm saying.
But who is the most popular elected politician in that party? Bernie Sanders.
He's not in that party. He caucuses with him.
Okay.
He's an independent.
So if you're going to say, hey, most popular politician in the country, come tour with me, you might want to listen to him. And if you don't listen to him and you didn't plan that out, and you have this kind of division, I could argue it's Tom Perez's strange behavior.
I disagree,
right?
Cenk. I totally disagree. I mean, I think that he is listening to him. The Democrats have listened to Bernie Sanders. Have they done every single thing that Bernie Sanders wanted? Did they nominate him? No, none of those things. But they certainly listened to him.
And that doesn't mean a thing.
But you just some issues.
Yeah,
just because they don't move on the highest
but
profile.
legislation. Have they moved on legislation? Not at all.
They're the minority party in the Senate. I mean,
Medicare for all is real.
Well, but
a bunch of Democrats have moved to support that bill now.
Progressives have, after a lot of pressure from Sanders, Conyers, and Justice
which is important. That's what you want. Those are the results you want.
Good. So we're agreed.
That's what's great about Bernie Sanders. That's what he's doing. They're in the minority party. Are they going to have Medicare for all by a week from Thursday? No, they're not going to. But you have Sanders changing minds, or even if they're not changing minds, he's making other Democrats feel brave about something that we don't think they should feel brave about, should just be doing. That's great.
So we're all agreed, and I hope the media agrees as well. Stop calling what Bernie Sanders is doing strange if he disagrees with Democrats. They disagree, okay, with the Democratic Party. Okay, so we're agreed on that. The second thing I'm gonna ask the media to do is to not assume that the Democratic Party establishment is right in every instance. That is their given assumption. Well, obviously the Democrats are backing this candidate, so that is the correct candidate. And so, progressive didn't back him. Boo, weirdo, okay? No, why not assume that the most popular person on that side of the aisle, in fact, in the whole country, the most popular politician in the country, maybe he's correct.
But I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's fair because, look, they're not saying that he's necessarily the right, that Ossoff is the right guy. They're saying that this is the guy the Democrats are putting all their money and resources and attention behind. And if Bernie Sanders is out there with the Democratic establishment on this tour saying we're aligned, we're on the same page, and then he doesn't back him.
No, I totally disagree. So let me explain why I'm not. Georgia is a really strange case and not a good example of this because it was a jungle primary. So if you got over 50%, that made a big difference. You would have won outright. So there, I might even disagree with Bernie Sanders, given where, especially going into the election, it was so close and no other Democrat had a real chance. So I look at that in a pragmatic and situational way. But if it's a regular primary and they say, like what you just said, hey, well, Manchin's got all the money behind him, so you shouldn't oppose him. Oh, hell no, I don't agree. I don't care how much money Manchin, I don't care how much the Democratic Party wants to waste on Joe Manchin. No, we're gonna primary him and we're gonna have a real progressive run in that race. I never will agree to that. Bernie Sanders should never agree to that. Why do I have to bow my head to corporate money? That's the whole point of being a progressive.
But Bernie Sanders is not a Democrat. He's not part of the party.
He's a progressive, much better.
Right, he is a progressive, that's fine. But we're talking about going out with the chairman of the DNC. I'm not saying that he's, that he's not right to be a progressive and not right, that you're not right to field somebody against Joe Manchin. We have our differences as to the efficacy of that, but it's smart to do that. But Bernie Sanders, if he's going out with the head of the DNC, it's a little different. I mean, you're buying into something that they're selling, and you have to. I think you don't have to.
Or attempting to sell alongside them, and hope that he will listen. Hope that they'll see the difference in the crowd's reaction when he's speaking, when Tom Perez is speaking. I've seen those pictures back and forth, and it might be that they do this whole thing, and he was naive, and it has no effect. And you might judge and say, look, it maybe has a 5% chance of working. But sitting on the sidelines has a 0% chance of working. And we could be mad at them for bringing him along and not going along with him, but we'd be madder if they didn't bring him at all, if they totally shut him out.
That's true.
And I think Bernie Sanders has been fighting on these issues, basically the exact same issues for decades and decades and decades. And there's all these points where someone could look and say, well, you tried up until this point, why are you still trying? But why stop now? I think that just because Trump won, he's still gonna fight for those positions. And a lot of people will say, you gave it your best shot, you lost the primary, you're now wasting your time. We should draft Bernie, or it should be a third party thing. Bernie Sanders understands those options. He understood those options during the last election. He could have run as a third party candidate. You're not gonna educate Bernie Sanders about these things. He has been doing this his whole life. He could be wrong in the end, but he has made the decision that however difficult the path is, however long it's going to take, this is the best bet to get his policies actually enacted.
Yeah, and I actually think he's far more practical than people give him credit for.
I agree. That's exactly what he's doing.
That's right. Otherwise, he would have run as a third-party candidate, which is very impractical. That's why we set up the Justice Democrats within the Democratic Party, because you can take over the party. You can actually be progressive and strong and not take corporate money. That is, I think, the correct path. JusticeDemocrats.com. Anyway, but I'll leave you on this note. There is going to be a war within the Democratic Party. It is unavoidable. This talk of unity is nonsense, okay? One side thinks that they should take the donor money and largely do what the donors want. Now they'll disagree with that description, but that's the establishment side. The other side does not want to do that. They don't agree. They will fight and one of them will win. This idea of unity is both a fantasy and two, is actually a slogan by the establishment intended to get progressives to bow their heads and just do whatever the moneyed interests want. And we don't agree, and we will never agree. Podcast The Young Turks anytime you want. tytnetwork.com/join.
I think it's weird.
No, it's not weird. In fact, you'll think,
I'm like a smart person.
do it now. tytnetwork.com/join.